Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mandy. I am the Slido facilitator for our weekly virtual series. And I would like to welcome all of our returning guests as well as newcomers and hope y'all get connected to our Slido activity so that you can submit questions for Janet and also answer some of our poll questions. It's pretty simple for those of you who haven't done it yet. I recommend using your mobile device. You can use the camera on your phone and point it directly at the QR code on the screen, and it'll prompt you to open the Slido link. You can also open a web browser, go to slido.com, and use the code on the screen, Innovate, to join us that way. And once you are in Slido, you can see where you can answer polls. You can submit questions that we will get to during our Q&A session. And you can also access some of the resources that you're going to learn about by clicking on the burger icon to the top left of the screen. And now I will introduce our host, Dr. Janet Pilcher.
Thank you, Mandy. Happy Tuesday, everybody. It's great to have you back on. For some of you who join us most every week, welcome back. And to others of you who are here for the first time, welcome. I'm Janet Pilcher. I lead student education and have had the great pleasure of hosting these webinars with some of my colleagues where we work with partners across the country and in leadership and really in improvement work and helping organizations achieve excellence and helping people be their best at work. So it's just great to be with you all on this Tuesday afternoon. So we're going to talk a little bit about innovation through this time of disruption and change. And I spent quite a bit of time really thinking through, how do we focus on innovation right now? And so I broke it up into kind of three different segments for us to think about. What do we mean by innovation? And so innovation is a broad term. It can be defined, very broadly. And you all may have a particular definition or way you're working on innovation. I'm going to try to define it in a way that I think we're facing innovation through this disruption and change process that we're working in each and every day. I'm also just talking about doing the difficult work of innovation. So it's doing work. Innovation is all about change and being adaptable, and that's just sometimes pretty difficult to do. And then I'll close it out by talking specifically about innovation and our reentry approach into, for those of us in education, the new academic year. So, let's start for a few minutes and let's just kind of personalize this for a second, just in the way we think about the term. To what extent do you see yourself as an innovator? So if you'll go to Slido and just kind of on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 not at all, and 1, man, I'm just, knocking it out of the park, one of my strengths. Let's see how you think of yourself as an innovator. Get a sense of our audience here. Okay, so as we look at the results come about innovation, and we tend to, this is what we tend to say right now, that innovation can be small things that make a big difference. So instead of thinking about innovation being so big and huge and something that takes a lot of time that we have to tackle, right now we're really looking at those small things that can be innovation, that just do things that we do differently that can make a big difference. And so in these unpredictable times, our people are asking us to produce predictable results, and we're asking that of ourselves. And so we're almost called to, I don't know about you as leaders, but I feel called to do small things differently. And I know that each and every day we can't look at things the same way. So it's almost that tugging at us of being called to do those small things differently. And so when I think of innovation, I think of innovation as seeing and seizing opportunities. And boy, do we have a lot of opportunities in front of us. What that tended to make me think about is back to some of Jim Collins' work and what he heard from level 5 leaders, high performing leaders, is leaders would tend to say, I've been lucky. I've got lucky. And we've heard innovators, people who have been very innovative and successful say, I got lucky in leading the organization to excellence or hitting this results or putting in this new innovative product. So I think it makes me think about what do we mean by luck? And, do you consider yourself a lucky person? And I think what does luck have to do with innovation? And I just think back to the research is really telling us that most people who are considered innovators really feel like, they've been lucky people. And so I did a little bit more thinking about that and research some sources that I have and connected to. And what I also really dug into is that again, lucky people have intention. Now, I've talked about that on a number of the webinars in the past, and so this is really resonating with me. It probably is with you as well. And so it's this concept of they generate their own fortune. If we're lucky people as level 5 leaders, we generate our own fortune. It's not just bestowed, upon us. And so there, through the research, there's been 4 things that researchers have found about successful people who consider themselves lucky that are innovators, and they're skilled at recognizing opportunity. So again, we have opportunities in front of us every time we turn around. Are we going to be skilled at recognizing those opportunities and jumping on those? That we listen to our intuition if we're level 5 innovators. So we're taking something, our experience, and then kind of what our feeling is, as well as looking at the data, and we're acting on that. And this third one is always something I have to work on. And that is really creating that self-fulfilling prophecy by having positive expectations and just really focusing my mind on the positive expectation that this can be done. We can do this. Let's pull together and do it. And then just with that comes the perseverance to transform sometimes, gosh, what we consider bad luck into good luck. So, I know you've been that way too. Man, I feel this is terrible. This is bad luck. And then do we just wallow in that sorrow for ourselves, or do we pull out of it as leaders and help our teams achieve success? So, think about this as we think about framing, what is innovation to us? Think about this. We tend to rationalize our failures, and I know that that's something that we all have done. And I know from childhood on, it's a constant battle of how we try to keep from doing that. So when we don't try things, we don't have to really rationalize our failures. We keep doing the same things in the same way and getting the same results. And the times are calling for us now to not do those same things. We don't really have a choice. And so it's really having that optimistic view of looking forward and doing the small things really differently and taking that risk and being bold. And so innovation can be small things that make a big difference. So you may think of innovation exactly as I've talked about it today, but I just found it really helpful to be reflective for myself, to really think through innovation in this way. And so let's dig a little bit deeper. And as we dig a little bit deeper, if you would, answer this question. And I'm going to connect the dots as we move through, but how difficult is it for you to unlearn something and relearn to do that same thing differently? Unlearn something and relearn to do the same thing differently. Take a few minutes and answer that question. Not difficult at all to extremely difficult. Yeah, so we're kind of having 6.1 is kind of our average, but a kind of 7 and 8s, to 4. So, kind of spread out a little bit from 4 to 8. So we have a little bit more of a spread so far in answering this particular question. So let's talk about that. And I'm going to look at it from a leadership perspective, and how we're modeling that or learning that behavior, and then how we're leading to how we're focusing on the people that we work with. So here's the great news about innovation, and again, this is, as we think about innovation, we're all learners, and we're all kind of the work in organizations that are all about learning. And so I think learning and innovation go hand in hand. And innovation is as much about unlearning, and it demands us to be adaptable. So the time is demanding for us to be adaptable, and the time is demanding for us to unlearn things. And so there's never a never more important time than to be innovative. And so innovation now just becomes part of what we do rather than kind of something we might like to do or something that may seem like a bright and shiny object. It just becomes part of our DNA of what we do every day. So here's the way I think about unlearning. I don't know about you, but I all my life when I was growing up, I really wanted to snow ski really well. I now live in Florida and I'm not around a lot of snow, so the aspiration was pretty steep for me. But I remember that first time I went skiing, I couldn't wait to do it. And so all of us that have been skiing have that top picture. You're kind of having at that V. They're teaching you how to ski down the bunny slope, and you're you move through that and you get pretty good, and then you go up the ski lift and have the first try at getting off that ski lift, and then you go down the hill. And I don't know if your experience was like mine, but I tried to do the same thing that I did on the bunny slope going down the big hill, and that's pretty much what I ended up looking like as I went down the hill. And so the key there is, this is truly a great example to me when I thought about it, that in order to go down the big hill, move from the bunny slope to the big hill, I couldn't snowplow like that anymore. I had to really adapt, unlearn a little bit what I learned in order to get accustomed to the beginning part of skiing, and unlearn that and make modifications and change. And so it reminded me of really looking through that stages of change that we go through in learning. And I think innovation is really difficult unless we're willing to unlearn and relearn. So when we think about doing something, as I think about the snow skiing example, and then to kind of transfer this just in general to things that you might have had to unlearn to relearn. When I was learning how to go down the slope, the bunny slope, I was unconsciously unskilled. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was very excited about it. And then I became kind of consciously unskilled. The first time I tried to do it and I kind of fell and hurt myself, it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. This is harder than I thought. Wow, I thought this was going to be great, and it's not really that great. And then I just kept practicing going down that bunny slope, and I became somewhat consciously skilled. And then when I got to that almost maybe unconsciously skilled, where I could just do it, just get up and do it, it felt good. Then I knew I had kind of mastered the bunny slope. And so it's in between that consciously unskilled to consciously skilled. When I'm struggling and it's painful, to I move through that pain, to I get to the point to where I feel like, okay, I'm getting this. That's what we call the critical learning point. And that's that creative tension space where, when we're working with people through innovation and change, through disruption, it's critical that we as leaders, that we help people get through that point. And coaching and guidance and support, those are the things that help us get people to that point. Well, then if you think about that ski example, once I got to unconsciously skilled when I was going down the bunny slope, I then tried to transfer that to the bigger slope, to the next level. And so what I realized pretty quickly is, when I transferred that same skill to something different, that I had to do it differently and I had to unlearn it, and I became unconsciously unskilled. Maybe some of us, to relearn, we don't have to go all the way back. But I needed a coach, and I needed to work through another critical learning point, because it got tougher and we kept moving the needle up, or the bar up, and I needed some help in order to get through that. And so when I realized I needed help, then I could then go through that stage of unlearning what I had learned, with having that knowledge, but really transferring that to relearning. And that's really what we're talking about when we innovate, because we're constantly changing and adapting what we do. So, what can we do now as we go in as leaders and as teams? What can we do now? And we find energy. And the way we find energy, as I always connect it back to that first slide I put up, and the first thing that I said today, we move unpredictable results into measurable ones to become more predictable. And it moves us away from uncertainty and energizes people. When I've been working with partners over the last month, what people are telling me, teams are telling me, is we just want to know what the vision is, where we're going, and how we're supposed to get there so that we can join together and move in that direction. And some of you are doing that really, really well. We also want to stretch people and ourselves. So it's unlearning that the normal business operations, what we normally have done, will not be in this to be done in the same way. So we're having to unlearn things and unravel those things, and that learning is uncomfortable. And so sometimes when I think about my SLCC colleagues. Some of them I know. I think Lana, you're on the webinar today. Several years ago, SLCC, South Louisiana Community College, they decided that every faculty member would have an online component of their courses years ago. So when they had to make the transition to go fully online, then they had built the foundational components to move online. Were people uncomfortable? Did we have to stretch people to get to that other place? You bet we did. But we built that vision and those predictable actions in order to help our teams move. So it's really blending and building the combination so that we can get people through those stretch moments. So as we think about building that energy and where we stretch people, we practice innovation. As you leave today, you have some things to think about. Here's what I've learned, and I think these things work just in general, very general recommendations. That when we practice innovation, we do that by engaging in conversations with teams. We're going to talk more to people, even though it's going to be Zoomed, and I know we're all Zoomed out, but we're going to be talking more with people and more with our teams. We're going to be asking questions to gather input so that we're finding new ways. We're not providing new ways, putting those out and saying, here's the way we're going to do it, but we're continuously gathering input by asking questions. And more specifically, we continue with probing with more questions to expand ideas. Conversations to gather input with questions to find new ways of doing things, and continuing to probe to expand on ideas. I think that's what innovation is all about for us right now, and our ability as leaders to lead that, and our ability as employees and work teams to really participate in that, to make our organizations become the best that they can be. And I guarantee you that we'll be better as we get to that other side. So I'll close today before we take questions with as we've been thinking about how we do that. We've created a reentry toolkit that, as part of what we'll do for our participants, we'll send out that toolkit. It'll be a free resource for people, but it's all about stretching ourselves, and it's all about ways that we can be innovative and unlearn to relearn. And the toolkit provides just some protocols and some ways and some resources that we've been using to help our teams move through this reentry point. And here are the components. It's moving fear to opportunity. There's a first self-assessment. It's really establishing those measures that matter so that we know what we're trying to achieve and where we're trying to go. It's making sure we have a communication approach across everything that we do, and that we're following a common template. It's doing an after action review, reflecting on what we've done to look forward to our future, looking at the possible scenarios that we're going to go in with, and looking at how things could change on a dime for us, and being prepared for that. And then we have a series of questions that you can use with teams. So you're asking those questions and probing to ask deeper questions to continue to build ideas for how we undo to redo how we're going to move to our workspace as we move into the new academic year. And then there's a high level reentry plan format that we could use to communicate with the people that we serve each and every day. So I'll summarize with this and then take questions. Innovation today is going to be part of our DNA. Sometimes when you answer the question, which most of you did relatively high on, do we think ourselves as innovators? I think we are going to be innovators, because we're going to have new ideas, and we're going to do that with people. And the last thing is, as a leader, what I've learned more than anything is I can't do that alone. I don't have all the answers. And I've been so thrilled with the opportunities that I've had to work with our team, my team, to really probe and ask questions and have deeper understandings to gain ideas. It's going to make us better than what we were a month ago, 2 months ago. We're gonna move to someplace better, and I know all of you are too. What exciting times we have ahead of us in education or in any organization or field that you're in. This is exciting. It's a moment of change for us. It's a moment where we have opportunity to innovate. Let's have fun with it. Let's have a positive, optimistic outlook on where we can go. And I'm glad to be on this journey with you all. So I'll stop there and take any questions that you all have about today or about innovation. Okay. When relearning takes longer than than we have for change, how do I relieve the anxiety behind the urgency? Yeah, great question. So relearning, I think it's chunking. That's not it. I know that's not a very professional word, but I think it's pulling things apart. So when we're unlearning something, if we look at it in a way that's so big, it's overwhelming for us. So how do we take the pieces apart and just start with one thing? We had a meeting this morning with our team, and we have kind of something that's a grand idea that we're really excited about. And then we also kind of said, you know what, that's the idea, but let's not think about that too much right now of kind of where we can go. Let's think about what we can do right now at this time that's going to make a difference, and look at the essential things that help us move from one place to another. Small things make a big difference, and that's still innovation. Really important. How do you help people on the team who resist innovation? I don't think we tell them we're innovating. I don't know. I think if we, the more, I don't know. I've just kind of, sometimes I think the word innovation is overused. I really am convinced right now that I just go back to that innovation is part of our DNA. To resist innovation, to resist changing and doing something differently, it's not, it's not, we have to do it. We can't, we're not at a place where people have choice, because the situation is requiring and demanding that of us. So the more it becomes just part of the natural work and flow of what we do, and the more we build our culture around that, and maybe not use the word innovation, but just talk about ways that we're going to continue to improve and move to excellence and work together and set our goals. And hey, I want ideas from people on how we do this, and I want to gain input, and that input and what you provide will help us move from one place to another. And that's the energy that builds in, that hopefully overpowers that resistance. If you have people who are completely resistant to change, then we probably should go back to some of our resources on how do you deal with low performance issues. And I would say right now, I don't know how we have high tolerance for people who just flat out resist. We have to be probably even more critical of ourselves as a leader and ways that we deal with that. We just don't have time for it. Is innovation just another word for change? None of us like change. Yeah, I think that probably, I just answered it. I think it is. I think in order to innovate, we have to change. And I like to use the word, adaptable with agility. I think about sports here, and you all know I like to use sports analogies. But when we're on a team, we have to adapt and be very agile based on the circumstances at hand, based on what's thrown at us, based on what we did well, based on what we didn't do well, based on what we've learned. Because as a team, if we went out and did the same thing over and over again, and we didn't adjust or adapt, and we just played the same game over and over again, we wouldn't be a very good team, and we might lose more than we win. So it just becomes, that change is shouldn't be scary. It actually, I think it builds the energy and excitement. And again, I just want to go back to, maybe we don't use the words change or innovation. We just start building in conversation about what we're doing is important, and how we engage our teams in conversation to move the needle forward. How do you inspire collective vision after such massive disruption? Yeah. So I'm going to take a little bit. I think this is the time to have a collective vision. So I have an opportunity to work with a university president who's taking the role of a new presidency, and he is coming in a new presidency and he has three kind of vision areas that he's focusing on. And I tell you, what energy and what inspiration that provides to a group of people and teams of people. So as leaders, I would challenge us to think about, if ever there's a time to have a collective vision and rally our troops around moving forward and teams around moving forward in a positive way and gathering that input around that collective vision, now is the time. And putting very significant thought to what that is. And that might be just a good topic for us to explore on a webinar. How do we really build a good vision for people to rally around? What is the balance between urgency of innovation and continuing to cater to employee emotional needs in the workplace? How do we know if we're pushing too hard? A great question. Um, so, um, so the balance is, I think, all of you, many of you we've talked about leader rounding, and I think leader rounding is more important than ever. We've talked about that on some of our podcasts and the webinars. Checking in with our employees to see how they're doing very specifically through these times, and managing that is important. So gaining information from them and asking that question and being able to balance that, I think is really important. And I also acknowledging that what the issues are. As leaders, I think we have to show our vulnerabilities much more than we ever have. That's what I found, is that I find that as a leader, it's important for me, important for the team, to really show when there are vulnerabilities and where emotionally it's draining. I mean, sometimes it's just to say, this is really emotionally draining. I know we have to work through this together as we're working through the things that we're trying to do each and every day. And I want to be a support for that, and I want us to be a support for each other. And I think making sure we build those specific ways of providing that support so that we can continue to push forward in a way that's most meaningful to our team and our organization. What's the most effective way to promote innovation with teams? I think that next to last slide that I provide is really built, having a structured approach, and there's probably multiple layers of slides after that would be the how-to, on asking good questions, setting out what the vision is, asking good questions, and continuing to probe on those questions, and continue to gather the input with your teams, and then refining that and defining that into a plan. And we use 30, 60, 90 days. What I've tended to say lately is this, that let's do 30, 60, 90 days. Let's put a lot of effort in the 30 days, because I really feel like at this time, when we get to the end of 30 days, our 60 day is going to change. Let's do 60 and 120, but let's be flexible to do 30, 30, 30, 30, so that we're really understanding what those changes need to be. I hope that's helpful, because I think that energizes teams. And then the last question, with budget reduction, how can we support our teams with the right resources and equipment to encourage and extend innovation? Yeah, I think, there's nothing more frustrating if we're trying to do something and we don't have the resources to do our jobs. And so I think leader rounding more specific questions on what specific resources do you need in order to accomplish the goals that we have at hand. And maybe a question is, what do we not need? I mean, what are there things that we could choose not to do, or things we don't need, where we could refocus or take some of those resources and reallocate those to other things, and making sure that we're using our resources to the best of our ability. But I think the balance of those resources and looking at, are they the right resources and aligning. So last thing with resources, if we're making changes and we haven't looked at how we realign our resources, we're probably not using our resources as efficiently as possible. So always that continuum of resource realignment. becomes extremely critical, and then making those critical decisions and priorities attached to that. I appreciate you all connecting today on this webinar. I hope that this has been helpful to you. It's always helpful to me to pull these pieces and parts together to really think about ways that we can be better at what we do each and every day. And I know that you're here because you have that same goal. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the day and a good week.